welcome to all of you tonight. My name is Kathleen Staten, and I'm the manager of Music Constructed. My full-time job is getting to help run this platform and make sure that music educators around the world are supported with dynamic, relevant resources, including lesson plans, research articles, and of course, professional development. I'm thrilled tonight to invite you into Are You Orff Curious? Because I know so many times that people think, or if I don't know what that is, I don't even know where to start. And so tonight we're your starting point. And you will be taken on this journey with Alaena Silva, who I've had the pleasure of working with here for what, almost a year, Alaena?
No, just in September. I was in the classroom all the way until June 2022. So I was doing this last year at this time. I was an elementary music school teacher, just like many of you.
So 18 years in the classroom, president of her Orff chapter, and of course, up through level 3 certified. And if you don't know what that means, that's okay, because she's going to cover it tonight. She is now working at West Music, who also supports Music Constructed. And Alaena's job is to help people like you find everything that you need at West Music. But tonight, her job is to help you learn everything you need to know about Orff. So with that, I'll hand it over. Thanks so much for being with us tonight, Alaena.
Of course, I am so excited to get to share some of what I know about Orff work and what I've experienced it in the classroom myself, working with, as I like to say, real life children and all that that entails. Yes. So if you are someone who is comfortable having your camera on, feel free. If it's like 8 p.m. for you, like it is for me, and you're tired and it's almost your bedtime, do not feel like you have to turn it on. Feel free to interact through chat. Feel free to interrupt me as well. I can assure you I am really used to it, having been in the elementary classroom for such a long time. So getting started, all right, just so I get an idea of how to gear this presentation best for you, where are you Orff knowledge-wise on a scale of Harry Potter? You may choose more than one answer. You can just type the numbers into the chat. I'm just going to kind of get an idea of where we're at. Are we more in the, theoretical knowledge area, like Hermione there? Are we more, yep, I see the ones there being held up. Are you more in the Draco land of, I've always heard it's Orff approach. I have to have the instruments though. I can't do Orff because I don't have any xylophones. Yeah, yep, lots of twos. I'm seeing them go by 2, 2, 2, 1, somewhere between, yep, 1.5. And then we've got Ron, lovable Ron, where he's just sort of like, Orff strudel? I kind of stumbled into this workshop. Wonderful. I'm seeing lots of 1s and 2s. I'm going to kind of approach tonight through the perspective of see, think, wonder. It's a way of making children's inner thinking visible when we're talking about how to think critically about things. It was all the rage and all the hotness at my school a couple of years ago, but it turns out it actually is a nice dovetail for Orff approach. I have a link in the slide deck to the actual see, think, wonder, but basically it's those 3 questions. So as you look at these photographs that are from my classroom last year at this time, in fact, because I recognize some of the lesson activities, either in the chat or answering, unmute and answer or raise your hand. What do you see? Second part, let's just start there at what do you see? What do you notice?
Alaena, I noticed a lot of kids moving and a lot of kids not being in chairs.
Yeah, no chairs in my classroom, except when we need it. Yep, working as partners, movement, engagement. Yep, involved, creative play. Yep, I'm going to keep on doing the answer. Yep, manipulative, stuff in their hands. Go ahead and keep on answering. And I'm going to say, go ahead and play the little video clip so you kind of get an idea. Yep. Not a single, I don't even think, let's see, the xylophone, you can see some of my instrumentarium in the background, but no kid is using it. And so one of the things that I want you to take away from tonight is you don't need xylophones, metallophones, glockenspiels to have an Orff-centered classroom. You really only need the approach and your body at the most basic level. And that is a huge misconception that I find over and over again with newer teachers or teachers who are less experienced in the classroom. They think that the instruments are what makes an Orff classroom, when really it's the approach and the velocity and the process that you use to teach. Notice that I never say the word method. It's really not a method. It is a way of approaching music education. Go ahead on to next slide. Were there any questions about anything there? Well, it's a wonderful song called Tomcat with, now we have movement and recorder and a whole bunch of other things that are really enhanced by the actual sound of the instruments.
I like your metallophone stands. Those are nice.
Oh, those are super great. So funny story, when I started, so that was a brand new school when I started there. I selected the whole instrumentarium, everything in that classroom were things that I had picked personally. I was in a pretty sweet situation that comes along
so
pretty
nice.
rarely. It really was. I wish I had known more when I was doing that. I was a lot younger and I didn't know nearly as much as I know now if I had to go back and do it again. But anyway, I had no stands when I first started. And I can remember my principal came in and observed me, and I was moving the bass metallophone, which is like 35 pounds, by myself, like physically picking it up and like moving it. And she was like, Alaena, that is crazy. Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, it's not that big a deal. I'm in my late 20s, I can do this. And she was like, oh, no, you need something. And so that was how it started. I got the rolling stands for the basses. You don't want to carry a bass metallophone. Don't be me. Don't carry a bass metallophone if you don't have to. And my classroom, I did a lot of movement. And in my classroom, there wasn't space for it. So I know, like in that little video clip, it looks like it's fine. It's not fine. There's too many kids in there and too many instruments. And so often what we would do is we would have them on the stands so that we could set the room to be whatever it needed for that day's lesson. So some days the instruments would be set up. Other days they'd be set up for part of the lesson and the kids would move them to the edges like you saw. Good question.
That's nice.
There's some tremendous answering going on in the chat, and you'll also get a
I
copy
lost
of
my
that
chat window.
And you can also take yourself off mute and just popcorn up the answers that you're seeing there as well.
This is what I really like doing, is talking to teachers and just sharing some of the things I learned over those 18 years, because I can assure you I did not know it all. I still don't.
So you have them dancing and playing instruments at the same.
Not to start. So like something like you saw in the second video that was like, oh my goodness, there are kids who are jumping, there are kids conducting, there are kids playing barred instruments, and there are kids playing recorder. We didn't do all that in one day. So a song like that starts with me singing it and being like, hey, how many times do you hear me sing X phrase? Okay, you identify where it is. Now raise your hand every time you hear X phrase. Cool, echo me on X phrase. Awesome, now you're in charge of X phrase and I have the rest. So you're building it like one itsy bitsy teensy tiny piece of a time. And in something like that, that was Tomcat, Rachel. It's from Recorder Roots 1. It's by Carole King. It's one of those oldies but goodies. It has a lot of, it's a recorder book, but it's Orff process. And so when I was teaching that song, it started from, they learned to sing it, E, G, A, E, G, A, comes back over and over, because my lesson objective, one of the like 50 I could have written, depending on how I wanted it to go, was students will be able to play E, G, A on soprano recorder. I think that's what I wrote it as. But they did a whole lot more than play EGA. Those kids at the end were playing the entire melody, and I built it in a skeleton kind of process where everybody learned EGA, then they learned A and C and added that in. I was a big fan of using colors whenever I was processing a recorder piece, meaning like I'd have like my level 1 part. So maybe I make it red and I'd say, all right, you only have to play the red parts, everybody. Then I'd add a next part, a blue part usually, and I'd be like, all right, you could play just the red or play just the blue. Or you could be, you know, superstar and go purple, which was play red and blue. And then I just keep adding colors to that and they would self-select. I would usually have a minimum level. And it was helpful for me too. I'm also very visual at the end of the day. It helps me keep track. But if an administrator came in, they could automatically see all the different levels that were happening and how I was differentiating. When that final performance that you were seeing, those kids self-selected what they did. So the kids who were doing the jumping, that jumping game that they were doing, so when you go back and rewatch, that jumping game is actually the rhythm of the metallophone part. And if you take that metallophone part, you don't have to play it on metallophones. There is nobody who's going to come to your classroom and say, oh my goodness, Carole King wrote this part for metallophones and you're not using metallophones to play it. Well, you're just voted off the music education island. No, that's not going to happen. So if you substitute whatever pitched or unpitched instruments you have, it's going to be okay. I find a lot of the student teachers that I had, or the teachers who were earlier in their careers, they're afraid to change things because they're like, well, it was written this way. And I am much more of a, well, the lesson plan's a guideline. That's a good starting place. So I didn't have to write it all myself. But then I was not afraid to take it in whatever direction my students needed. And so to get them to a point where they could do those higher level things and feel like they could and feel like they could achieve, they really had to trust me and trust each other as well. And so I spent at least the first 2 or 3 years keeping the risk low and keeping the reward level high, if that makes sense. So I never put them in a position where I didn't think they would be successful. They might not have thought they were going to be successful, but I knew that at least somebody was going to be able to do it. And if one kid can do it, well, anything you can do, I can do better. Gene was going to kick in on at least one child. All right, levels. So talking about levels, so taking Orff levels, that's a big, both financial and time commitment. Totally worth it, but it is a commitment because levels courses, with the exception of the New York City course, which runs during the school year, every other Orff levels course that I know of takes place during the summers. And the reason, and they are in person and they are for 2 weeks back to back. And that is a big barrier for a lot of folks. And I totally understand why. I've got 3 kids. Getting away for 2 weeks in a row, away, mommy's not home at all, is a really big deal at my house. But the payoff is part of the reason that AOSA requires that is you become this very tight cohort with the other people in your levels course. And it's really highly recommended that you take a level, you then teach the following school year, before taking your next level, the idea being you get to try what you learned and figure out how it works for you in your classroom, with your kids, with your administrator who is judging based on whatever background they have or don't have in music. And so I would never tell someone to do anything exactly the way I did, because what I did worked for me, my classroom, my students, my situation. But if you do take those levels, I'm still friends, really good friends with the people I did my levels with. And I did my levels 10 years ago, maybe actually more than 10 years ago, but we still have those really close bonds. And we share up till last year, we shared lesson plans. We would, do the comparing notes on, hey, that thing that we did in levels, how did it work for you? And for some people it worked great, and others it was nope, never doing that. It was always funny to go back through our levels notebooks and be like, oh, that one song, it's like a cornerstone, a rock for me. And then another person would be like, yeah, I never touched it once. So it really is what you make of it.
Yeah, if you do have questions specifically about any part of Orff, whether it's the process, the philosophy, what do you need in order to make it happen, feel free to put it in chat. We can help get those to Alaena, or you can unmute.
And the other thing I want to mention is I am a sales consultant for West Music. I am really happy. It's not about buying a certain product. It's really, sometimes you just need to talk through it with someone who really understands. There have been so many teachers I've talked to in the last 9 months where they don't have a lot of clarity. I want you to know that not just me, but all of the sales consultants, we're here to be that support for you. So if you want to call and say during a test, oh, yes, I do. It's called folk dancing all day long, Rachel. lots of folk dancing, not a lot of instruments because they don't have the focus to do the instruments. So yes, I do have those kinds of lessons. My typical testing season lessons would be a lot of folk dance. If you're familiar with Phyllis Weichert, she has a whole giant book along with New England Dancing Masters. And I had like a kind of folk dance sequence that I would use. And I would always do it, started at testing season, because it dovetailed nicely with all the sitting and focusing they were required to do. But with folk dance, it also required an element of their working together. Testing is so like individual. I block everyone else out. It's all about me on my test, doing my work. And I felt like folk dancing was a nice juxtaposition to that, where it was us doing our dance, connecting together. So I felt like I was trying to be the opposing force to all of the testing that was happening. Yes, there are. So if you look, I want to say, Kathleen, I forget which one. I was at another Music Constructed, and the person did a lot of New England Dancing Masters stuff.
Yep,
and
actually,
it is
it's
on-
Will Doublestein, and you can follow
we
him at
go.
Bowtie Music, or also his session is free and is available on our YouTube channel. Zachary asked a great question, which is, can you give a basic overview on the philosophy and basic principles behind Orff?
I think at its core, it's meeting the child where they are and being like, how do I put it? It's giving kids a chance to do and a chance to explore and a chance to create and to make mistakes with guidance. It's not about me saying, okay, this is how it goes. Here's my Orff arrangement, friends. Here's how it goes. And we learn it line by line. That's not really Orff approach. I mean, that's an arrangement written for Orff instruments, but would I call it Orff approach? No. Orff approach would be more, hey friends, we're going to be playing with fast and slow today. And we're going to explore it by doing like maybe a movement game with it, where we might pretend, if I'm talking now littles, like kindergarten, first grade, we might pretend by moving in different ways to the teacher playing on maybe a bass xylophone, maybe a hand drum, maybe a cajon. And they would explore moving first, then it would move to them trying to play the different type of notes I was playing. From there, it would move to them getting a chance to make up their own music. Now, I'm not saying kindergarten or first grade, they're not going to sit there and make up a song. That's just not appropriate. But it might be something like, oh, here's a building block of TT, here's a building block of ta, and here's a building block of rest. Pick a way of how you want to put it together, and we'll make it a part of our bigger song. That's how I would compose in an age-appropriate way. How do you plan your units? So my units, it depends on your school. My school was very, very broad. I was on the music curriculum committee for however many years, and we purposely wrote it to be as broad and easy as possible. So when I was doing planning for that, I wasn't necessarily thinking Orff approach. Orff is just how I taught. It was like incorporated sort of into everything because it worked really well for me. When I was thinking of my actual planning, though, I always thought of it like a scaffold, where I'd be like, all right, what is it I want them to do at the end? And then I'd be like, what are all the requisite skills? And then I would pare it down level by level until I got it to its most like basic essence. So I might take a song from one of the volumes that's really complicated, and at the end of the day, if I strip away all of the extra, it's a ta-ti-ti melody using so la mi. And that's how I would often build things up. What are the volumes? So the volumes are a series of 5 books written by Carl Orff and Gunnar Kateman that show examples of Orff style pieces, but they're not meant to be just played straight out of the book. They're meant to be sparks of the imagination, where one of the things that I like to do, because I'm a giant geek, is look at other teachers' volumes, because they write their own pieces in there, or how they've taken pieces apart and put them back together again. And it's a very individualized process sometimes, where one teacher can take the same little snippet of a melody and do it in a way that is completely different, yet still completely amazing. But this based on the same little snippet of music.
Well, I do want to mention that it's just about 7:30 right now, and this was a 30-minute session. So maybe, Alaena, if you can take off the screen share, and we can just enjoy a one-on-one conversation with you. If anybody has further questions, and I'll invite anyone who would like to comment on your experience with Orff. I know a lot of us have had at least some peripheral experience with it, but I think the biggest takeaways, and Alaena, let me know what you think, are that it's not do this, then do that. It is meant to be a whole child approach that was built on the work of Kodai and other people, that, like Alaena said, meets the students where they are. How do you apply that? There are some great resources on our website written by people like Alaena, who sort of take you through the how do you build it. But one of the biggest things that I know we want you to walk away with today is knowing that it isn't just one perfect way, and that it's really more of a way of thinking about how you're building your lesson plans, building your unit plans, than it is a prescriptive, you must do this and you must have that instrument. Did I do that right, Alaena?
Basics. And if a levels course is just not in the cards for you right now, I would encourage you to seek out, if you have a local chapter of AOSA. They are located all over the country, and that is a really good entry point, not just from the perspective of, you know, getting really high quality professional development that's relevant to what you are actually doing in your classroom, but the connections you can form there with other teachers in your area. One of your greatest resources really is each other. And I learned so many things from the people that I connected with through my chapter workshops. So that is something else that yep, there we go, with all the links to all the things. Yep, the Teaching with Orff blog. I'm going to go a little bit more in depth next week. Next week, I'm doing a session that is on all of the really, really high quality free things I found on the internet over the years. So you don't have to take Saturday mornings finding them like I did. All of the resources that I'm going to share next week are things that are of the highest quality. Oftentimes I know the teacher who's sharing them personally, and I would be like, I said to one of the teachers whose work I'm sharing with permission, because it's on the internet for free. One of those teachers, I was talking with her at our latest workshop, and I was like, why are you offering all this for free? It's amazing and wonderful. And she was like, Alaena, you know, it's just, I don't really care about the money. It would be so much work to go through all the effort of monetizing it. I would rather just give it away to teachers for free who can use it and incorporate it in their classroom. So she's an amazing person. I'll talk more about her next week and all the amazing things that she shares for free. How can you come? That's a great question. Kathleen, how can they come next week?
I was just getting ready to share a couple of links. We've got a session from 7 to 8 on Monday, and we'll get the link to that in chat for you. And then we also this summer are offering a graduate course with Michelle Brinkman. You can get 29 hours of seat time out of the way, and you can actually build your own Orff curriculum guided with an Orff expert. So we'll pop those into chat for you tonight. Also, we just like to thank you for coming and sharing your Monday Night Live with us. We'll make sure that you get a copy of the chat, the slide presentation, and the video from tonight to use for your reference. So thank you so much for joining Alaena, myself, and Music Constructed for Are You Orff Curious? And we do hope to see you next week. And if you have any questions, you can find Alaena's contact information in her bio, and we will get this all out to you. So thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again at another Music Constructed event.